Priscilla Yule is the founder and educational director of Casa Ranch Montessori Homeschool Cooperative, an eco-conscious, home-based Montessori program that is educating for sustainability and cultivating environmentally conscious global citizens. Priscilla has been a Montessori educator for over 10 years with early childhood and elementary Montessori credentials and a master's degree in curriculum and instruction. During COVID, Priscilla began homeschooling her two young boys, and that started her on her path toward education entrepreneurship. Priscilla Yule, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here, and I was so glad to meet you in person recently when I was visiting Florida and hear more about Casa Ranch. So I want to get to the whole kind of origin story of your program, but let's start with your background as an educator and specifically a Montessori educator. How did that come to be for you that you wanted to be a teacher and that you were um, gravitating towards Montessori education and that philosophy? Tell us about that.
So growing up, I've always been in the arts. Throughout high school, I was in AP art. So I did lots of photography classes, painting, cartooning, oils, acrylic. And, when you get to your senior year, you're asked, well, where do you want to go? What do you want to study? And I originally thought that I was going to be an art director for an advertising agency. And so I did do 1 year of art college, transferred over, that was in DC. I transferred over to Barry University in Miami and majored in art and advertising and photography. Um, then from there, graduated and something called me over to New York City, found a little job in for this real estate company working as a photo editor, and just found myself not being creative at all. Living in New York was too expensive. I wasn't getting paid, so I had to move back down. And from there, I landed on another job with a photographer that lasted for 3 months. And I sort of had to reevaluate and reassess my life then. I was young, I was in my early 20s, and I kind of asked myself, well, what gives me purpose? What kind of career can I have that will be fulfilling enough where I can be creative and, make a difference in the world? And I always just loved children, even from when I was a child. Babysat at a very young age and just was really interested in the whole psychology of the child. So then I thought, well, do I go back to school and do art therapy? Do I, get into education? So I just landed on a job working at my very first Montessori school as a teacher assistant and fell in love right off the bat. I came into this beautiful environment, classical music playing, the smell of, lavender, clean floors. The shelves were just so simple and beautiful, and the kids loved coming to school. There was just this happiness in their eyes, and their curiosity just continued, and just I felt a real sense of warmth and something that I had never felt and experienced in my own educational journey. Growing up, to a mom who was an immigrant from Brazil and barely knew English, so I had to go through schooling learning English myself, and never really having that connection to teachers or towards the schooling system, as a child of an immigrant and ESL learner as well. Um, and so when I saw these children and, I felt what I felt in this environment, that was it for me. I then got my training here in South Florida to teach 3 to 6 year olds. I ended up moving to London for a couple years with my now husband, who is English. And I did continue my Montessori journey there. I applied for 2 schools and worked there. And then also completed my elementary, so 6 to 12-year-old training over there, which is an incredible experience. So I feel very blessed to have worked in so many Montessori schools, four in South Florida and then two in London, and all very different. The only similarity is that they all worked with Montessori materials, but all very different, from the way they ran the schools to, the space that they provided for the children. One of my takes that I got working in London was actually how the children went out in all sorts of weather, and all you needed was appropriate clothing, rain boots, raincoats, snow boots, snow jackets, just anything. Unfortunately, they don't have the greatest weather, but it was just so, um, inspiring to me that, the children were still, they looked at weather as not a negative thing. And it's something that was very much needed. And so when I came back to Florida, I had this idea, well, wait a minute, this is the Sunshine State. Why are we not outside? And what is going on? So I came back with a whole different view on what Montessori means to me and how it should be really run. And so, even with my master's degree, which I later then did after coming back, I was kind of, forced to reread all her books and and just fall into the, what it means to be an authentic Montessori program. And so that's why I went back into doing my master's in curriculum and instruction, because, one day I had this idea, well, one day I'll have my, program, and I'll kind of create it the way, I think it should be, with all the positives that I gained from working in all these schools. And I just never knew it was going to be so soon after I got my master's degree, which was in December of 2019.
Wow. Okay. So you were already thinking someday I will be a Montessori school founder, but you didn't expect it to happen so quickly. And at the time, were you working in a Montessori school in 2019, or were you just in school full time getting your master's?
So I had left the school that I was in because I wanted to focus on my big, dissertation, paper, and it was actually focusing on social emotional learning and mental health of boys in Montessori schools. And at the time, my two boys were only 3 and 5. And so, from having boys myself and doing the master's, I kind of also fell in love with the idea of studying more about boys, because
Mm.
as a mom, you just don't have, you just don't have the same psyche. You're not a boy. So that really interested me from a mom's perspective. And so that was my paper and that was my research. But I was working at a school and they were at a school. When COVID hit, I did have to take them out because they were so young to
A
do
Montessori school?
yes, to do the virtual learning.
Mm.
And luckily, from all my experience, I had already had the knowledge of, well, what does the inventory look like for a 3 to 6-year-old classroom? And then working as an upper elementary teacher, I had already known the inventory for that age too. So I slowly started to buy materials for my kids because I didn't want them to, miss out on their learning when COVID happened. And started tutoring from there on.
Okay, so spring of 2020, you pull the boys out, you start homeschooling them and tutoring others. And at that time, were you thinking, okay, now's the moment for me to be a founder, or were you still thinking that that was in the future?
No, I was just, the boys were so young, and I was tutoring other people's kids as well that were, had also taken their child out of the school. And so I just, kind of played with this idea. Okay, I'll tutor and let's see what happens because the world, was at a pause and no one knew what was going to happen. Um, until summertime, I opened a little summer camp for these children and a few others. We were 12 kids. And it was a great time. We jumped in our pool, we did a lot of outdoor learning, we hired plant-based chef, we hired, an art teacher. And so that kind of became the initial stages of Casa Ranch. And so the parents actually really forced me to continue. And so they said, well, what are you doing in the fall? I don't want the kids to go back in masks, the whole thing. And so I said, well, I can continue the tutoring. Maybe I can hire another Montessori, teacher. And so that's how it started. That's how it grew. And, Instagram has really been an amazing platform for all these other edupreneurs or entrepreneurs who were also mothers, right, at the time.
Mhm.
And so from Instagram, I met all these amazing moms that started their own niche, right, with plant-based cooking, with science, with all these little beautiful programs that were just so defined and just so coming from like an expert point of view. They really loved what they were doing. And you don't get that at schools normally. Normally you're asked as a Montessori teacher, okay, teach everything. And so at some point of your teaching, you feel like you're not giving your best to these students because maybe you're not a scientist or maybe you don't know how to do yoga, things like that. So, um, and the outsourcing of these different, opportunities and programs really kind of, made the switch of my light bulb click because it was kind of what made Casa Ranch unique in a sense that you had all these different programs where homeschoolers would try and find, right, to meet other homeschoolers. And so their children can get the social aspect out of the homeschooling experience. But here I am bringing everything in one place.
Right.
So that was the unique, I think, point in the life of Casa Ranch where parents really valued what I was offering.
I love that. I also love that you started with a little summer camp with a dozen kids as your launch point, and then that led to parents saying, "No, we want this all year. Don't
Yeah.
stop." And I think that's a great strategy for any prospective education entrepreneurs to think about getting started and starting small, sort of a pilot program that maybe a small summer camp just to let families kind of test the waters could be a good initial
Yeah.
strategy. So that's great. So what
Yeah.
was that first year like then? This would have been the academic year 2020 to 2021. What was that like? Were you running this out of your home? How many days? What was the structure and format of that?
Yeah, so it's in my home. I'm just under 2 acres. So very blessed to have that space also. And we did a lot of outdoor learning. There isn't too much space inside my home, but I do have a great, covered patio area where we set up some lessons there as well. And so it was very much a Montessori outdoor setting, which it's really rare to find that simply because the Montessori materials need to be protected and it can get easily ruined. But I made it work somehow. And so we did, throughout the year, I hired one teacher and then we outsourced a lot of our other programs, like I said, art and then the yoga, and then the cooking, and then science and things like that. I found surfskate science as well.
Mm.
And so we were such a small group that we were able to carpool over to the beach. That was just so amazing and just so unique and different. And we all, like as families together, felt so blessed to be at the beach with our kids. learning, science through action sports. So, um, and that was our year. And, through Instagram and word of mouth, it just exploded. And, I started having to think really serious about the website and about, um, legalities. How many kids can I fit in my home? And because it was a cooperative, a lot of the families did have the time, and flexibility to be there with their children, either teaching, you know, um, we had a beautiful teacher also who taught gardening and just little things, but you also had the families who couldn't. Um, and so I think the legalities of everything kind of, made me a little scared to continue.
Mm,
And throughout this whole time, I was doing research on where we could move, and the lack of just, I don't know, space or, other opportunities I could possibly move the school to is just, zero, zero. And you have this beautiful space, and then to put it in a commercial space, it just
mm,
defeated the whole purpose of why I started the program in the beginning, which was the nature-based aspect of Montessori as well. And so, we're now in our fourth year, and luckily I was able to find a beautiful, outdoor setting where we rent that space as well to continue the elementary. And at my house, you know, we've hired so many teachers. Now we are at like, 25 educators, six who are, full time, and then the rest are all, in their niche, experts at something rather. We even have like a mental health counselor who's a male, and he's brilliant at working with the boys. And this is something that he just does not exist in schools,
mm.
especially Montessori schools.
So you
So
have two locations now, Priscilla?
we have two locations. We're still running from my home with, you know, very, very less children. But I'm in a situation where, now I have families with little children as young as two, wanting the full experience, wanting also to be in nature, but also under the care of, just very passionate and loving teachers. And also in a smaller setting, right? Because, the ages of 2 to 3s, there's a lot of daycares out there that just jam-pack children. And, then you get lots of sick children. It's just not quality care. So I have a group of moms who wanted to do the toddler program.
Hmm.
So now I'm in a situation, okay, well, do I turn my house into a family daycare home with, maximum 10 kids? So that process is ongoing. I still haven't found my permanent location. The big dream would be to build eco, and follow through with the sustainability passion of mine that I think we should really stick to as well. Because when you look at buildings of schools, the AC is awful quality. You have mold in the walls. Oftentimes, these buildings are very old. So for me, if I want to do anything and kind of be a model or change the world in some way, I want to do it from the roots, from the ground. What are the problems that children are facing in school, not just through curriculum, but also environmental. Um,
Yeah, I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about that because eco-consciousness and environmental sustainability are key pillars of Casa Ranch. Tell us a little bit more about that motivation and vision.
So it kind of, yes, the nature program inspired me, but also the lack of space, right? So then after I did research on where I could possibly grow, I bought a yurt. And a lot of people in South Florida do not know what a yurt is. Um, and it's a huge tent. It's a very, structured, grounded, firm, stable, circular tent that you would normally find in, campgrounds and in forests and in colder areas. Um, and so I built a yurt in my backyard, and it is just beautiful. The exposure of wood, the circular space, the little, dome, which we get natural lighting. We don't have to use electricity. So the classroom you go in, and it goes back to my very first Montessori experience with the wood and the cleanliness of everything, the simplicity. And that's what you get inside a yurt. It's just so beautiful. And, circular reminds me of nature. Everything in nature is geometric. And as well as our, beliefs and teaching holistically, it's all circular, whole child education. So it kind of fit perfectly into our philosophy aesthetically, right? So from there, the yurt inspired me even more. And I came up with this idea, well, how do we differentiate ourselves from other Montessori schools? What can we do, from a blank, canvas to really build something amazing here and maybe be a model, eco school, or, the first green school in South Florida. And so I would love, if I had $1 billion, I would love to just build eco within the rotunda, architecture style. I think the circular um, space is just, it really speaks to what it is and the energy you feel as a teacher, and then also as a student. It just seems so much more peaceful when you compare it to a four-wall classroom, because they're all connected. We're all interconnected, and I feel like the circle also, it comes back to that as well. So that was my really biggest inspiration with the eco school. And so then I started researching things like, what are the eco schools out there?
Hmm.
And there's, Green School Bali, and their aesthetics is amazing. Their entire school is made out of bamboo, um, in Indonesia. And then they've opened sister schools in New Zealand, South Africa, and Tulum, Mexico. And so there are some programs out there that are really inspiring. And I wonder if we could somehow, bring this big dream to South Florida with all these, rules and regulations in place. But how to do this, I'm still trying to figure it out. I think money is the biggest obstacle and hurdle of
Yeah,
ours.
I'd love to get a little bit more into some of those entrepreneurial challenges and barriers. But how many learners do you have now? I know you said you have 25 educators, including 6 full-time teachers. What is your student population?
So at the moment, we have around 47 now with a
Amazing.
wait list.
Oh my gosh. So starting with a dozen kids in the summer of 2020 and now 47 kids in a wait list must be incredibly gratifying just to see so much demand for your special program. And you'd probably like to try to meet that demand, but it seems like space is a challenge, funding is a challenge. Tell us a little bit about some of those headaches or entrepreneurial burdens.
Yeah, so it's just, I even have, and my community is so beautiful. All the parents who, are lawyers or, realtors, they're all trying to help. And definitely not having enough funds is our biggest hurdle. How do we raise those funds? But real estate in South Florida is just through the roof. You can't find anything decent for less than $1 million. Um, and so for me, we've kind of just been afloat. Yes, my house was the the blessing, right? And the blessing in disguise, I should say, and our starting point. But without space, we can't grow. And where we are in our second location, although it is great as well, it's not ours, right? And it's not ours to build on. And so we're kind of just surviving with what we have now, and maybe looking for investors, who also kind of are alongside of being a philanthropist as well, but also believe in kind of saving childhood and saving, what it could look like in a few years. We won't have parks, we won't have green spaces. Like, why aren't our schools, why isn't this the number one priority for schools?
Mm,
And so when, I have my parent looking into real estate and he's looking at schools that are shutting down, and he's asking me, could this be a potential place? And I say, no,
mm,
I'm going to be really stubborn about this. And I say, I do not want to be in an old building with long hallways. I don't want to do it because that's not who we are. And so, yeah, the real estate, land, it's one thing that will stop us if we do not come up with some sort of solution sooner than later.
mm.
Uh, yeah.
And you are a homeschool cooperative. So, how does that work in practice? Are parents on site? Are some parents on site? Are you meeting every day? Tell us a little bit about that format.
Yeah, so we have, options of starting 3 times, 4 times, 5 times a week. And we did start out like that. The problem, and I don't know if this is a problem, but the children want to come every day.
Yes.
So, they tell their parents, well, this is the schedule, and I'm going to miss out on this class if I don't go on this day. And so it's obviously more beneficial for the parent, to drop their child off daily, because they want to be here. But, you do get the homeschoolers who do have their routine with their own families and they travel and things like that. So they come 3 times a week, or they have their extracurricular activities that they don't want to entirely stop, horseback riding or music, things like that. So it is generally, though, I would say 90% of our student population, they come every day.
Hmm.
And so it becomes a challenge. Also, we are a cooperative, but what happens to the families that cannot be
Hmm.
there with their children, being involved somehow, right? So we do offer other opportunities to be involved, but I think in terms of, what the definition of a cooperative is, and then the definition of a school, we're kind of leaning towards, okay, we're a school, you know.
Hmm.
But and if ever we do go that path where we have to become private, I still love the community sense of becoming involved and open door policy. You don't get that so often. The schools now, you drop your child, shut the door, and you can't go through the classroom. So I really do like that opportunity for parents to be involved in any way that they can.
Yeah, so I'm curious, why wouldn't you want to become a private school? Like, why stay a homeschool cooperative? Is it that family involvement piece, or what?
Yeah, so I've had this discussion with the families now. One of the things is the 180-day, I think, attendance.
Mm,
So, you have those families that travel,
mm,
and we send work with them, and then they come back, and then they're right into the program again. So we have that. We have some families that don't like standardized testing, nationwide testing, things like that. They don't want that pressure for their child. And our community has actually grown into something, or it's grown into a program where we're so inclusive that now we have such a diverse and also neurodivergent students. We have a lot of neurodivergent students, um, and becoming a private school, you do have a few opportunities there with scholarships and things like that. Um, but then also with private, I can't remember what the other thing that I would have to follow. I mean, I guess, coding, building things like that,
Mhm.
regulations like that. Possible things like, and I don't know if private schools need to go through this, but like all the drills, I don't know if that's a requirement. I haven't looked into the drills, but I know that a lot of our families, don't want that experience for the students. Um, so just
Yeah.
little things like that, I think would kind of interfere with the energy that we have going on and with our vibe and the whole philosophy.
I
So,
wonder if you can talk a little bit more, Priscilla, about your value of inclusiveness. So, in addition to being focused on eco consciousness, inclusivity is really important. You embrace learning differences. You mentioned lots of neurodivergent students.
mhm.
How does that work in a microschool environment?
So, I think through COVID, a lot of the families learned, about, what was happening in schools, right? Through, sitting behind their child doing online learning. And organically, a lot of the families that we have attracted um, have children who are diagnosed or undiagnosed, with ADHD, dyslexia, and with all those things comes anxiety. Um, and our program is very attracted to them because we do have a good balance of outdoor, indoor, nature-based, individualized learning. So we keep our classrooms very small, between 12 and 15 kids max in each class. Um, and then we have a lot of support, and as well, our community has grown into organically has grown into a community of passionate also parents who are therapists. We have 3 or 4 therapists in our community that have now contributed their time by being in the classroom, and so now they are supporting these kids. They're also supporting the teachers, the guides who don't know about, ADHD or dyslexia and what to do, how to help them, how to support them. So it's just so beautiful. And I feel so blessed to have this support. And it's something that it's hard to find in schools, right? The support for guides and teachers. You're just left to your own devices in your little classroom, and there is no room for collaboration. There is no room for growth. And so I just feel like every year I've grown so much, and I think the teachers have as well, and the parents are just so grateful to be, for me to have opened the doors to them and say, we need you. We need your expertise. How can we help these kids, have a great time at school, but also have a productive time, with their learning. Um, so that's what I love about our philosophy and the importance of inclusivity as well. And also different backgrounds, right? We also have a lot of people from different backgrounds, but with Step Up, I would love to offer this opportunity for people with low income family households and things like that, because it is such a privilege, I would say, to be part of this program. Um,
Yeah, you're talking about the Step Up scholarships, the Universal Education Savings Account program that just got implemented in Florida in 2023. And prior to that, Florida had led the way in school choice policies for low income students and special needs students. And now, of course, that's universal. So um, that's certainly a way to expand access for families and create more of the diversity in your program.
yes,
So, yeah.
and they
So,
just opened up a new program for home education programs now,
yeah,
which
yeah.
we fall under that category. So I'm very grateful for that.
Oh, good. So do you have some families taking advantage of that?
Yes, a
Good.
good majority of our families.
Oh
Mhm.
my gosh. Oh, that's great. Wonderful. So, Priscilla, if you think back to December 2019, when you said, oh, someday when I have my own program, this is what it's going to look like, and I'm excited to build this. Now that you've built Casa Ranch, is it what you always imagined? What do you think?
Yes and no. It's just it has so many different branches, that I would have never imagined. One of them being the involvement of parents, like I was saying, the therapists and things like that.
Mm,
Um, I never would have imagined this much support from parents with their own professionalism, right? And expertise with wanting the program to grow. So that support is huge because when you're an entrepreneur, you feel very alone at times. You get very overwhelmed. You feel like you're the only one doing the research, and it gets all too much, and especially if you're a mom with all the duties you have there as well. So I never expected the support of the community like this. It's just really I don't know what the adjective is, but just it touches my heart. And I couldn't be more grateful. So yeah, it's every year I learn something new, and Casa Ranch grows into just something more magical. So although, I did have an idea of what it would look like, this just is far beyond my expectations and what I thought it would look like.
oh, that's so great. So, as we begin to wrap up, what advice do you have for other parents or teachers thinking about launching a microschool or some other homeschool cooperative or innovative learning model? Do you say to them to help them get started?
I think um, the number one thing is to not be afraid, and to kind of have somewhat of a plan. Yes, you can start off as a pod and see where that goes. You can start off, in parks and things like that, and your community will naturally grow from there wherever you are. And Yeah, really write down what your vision is. What's important to you as a edupreneur or entrepreneur, or whatever you want to call it, mompreneur. What's important to you, to your families, to your own children, and start writing things down in terms of where you'd like your program to go, and what sort of opportunities you can create that don't already exist uh,
Mm,
in your community, maybe for a different population, or a different location. I don't know. Maybe you're in the city, right? So I would say that, really envision and write all the things down that you would like to make a change, and to I don't know. I'm at a loss of words here.
yeah. What
Make
is
an
not
impact.
Yeah, make an impact and provide something that's not currently existing in your community or in
Exactly.
some way. Yeah, that's so great. So, Priscilla, if my listeners and viewers want to connect with you, learn more about Casa Ranch, follow your progress, learn more about eco-conscious microschools and Montessori, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they can follow my website, casaranchmontessori.com, or Casa Ranch Montessori and Instagram, and they can follow me there.
Well, I wish you best of luck, Priscilla, as your program grows. Hopefully, you can get those families off the wait list and find ways to accommodate that increasing demand.
Yeah.
Priscilla Yule, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you, Carrie. It's been an honor.